Woe be unto him who opens one of the 7 gateways to hell, because through that gateway, evil will invade the world.
Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on, and no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. In this little town, when the 14th comes round, there's a silence and fear in the air. Remember the morn that the legend was born, all the shock and the horror was there. Oh, the legend, they say, on a Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on, and no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. And no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago.
Hey everybody, I'm here with Ian Irza from Black Gloves Mysteries on the Land of the Creeps with Glenn Morgan. He does a really good job talking about Italian gialli and other things. So how you doing, Ian?
I'm here for our date, Dave. I'm good. You say Greg Morgan, not Glenn Morgan. You're thinking of the movie producer.
Wolf Creek. I'm thinking of Wolf Creek. Yeah. Greg Morgan, Glenn Morgan. I'm sure he's probably got confused like that before, hasn't he?
Maybe. I think it may have happened one other time. One of the funniest things was when we were talking about Actually, there was one time he had a mix-up. We were talking about Case of the Bloody Irish, and he said Case of the Bloody Iris, and he said George Clinton instead of George Hilton, which is funny. Called him both with that one.
What if he did the soundtrack for Case of the Bloody Irish? That'd be funny.
Oh yeah, that would be funny.
So we're here to discuss a 1981, a fairly popular movie from the year, a slasher, of course. What else from 1981? And it is Joe Zito's The Prowler. So, yeah. I guess the plot is as follows. In 1945, somebody gets a Dear John letter and they get a revenge kill. We fast forward to 1980 and they're having the dance again, or the homecoming dance or whatever dance it is in these typical kind of slasher fashions. And of course, the kills start again. Something triggered somebody. Yeah, it's pretty typical plot, but it's known well because of the special effects by Tom Savini and the brutal kills. And the director would go on to obviously have a pretty successful slasher in one of the big franchises, Friday the 13th Part 4. Some would say the best of the franchise. And previously, he did another kind of proto-slasher called Blood Rage, not to be confused with the 1987 Blood Rage Nightmare at Shadow Woods, but another one that's also has Lawrence Tierney in it. So what are your initial thoughts on The Prowler? Any first-time watches, any history with it?
Well, the first time I watched it, I had listened to a podcast that talked about it back in the day, and I think I rented it from DVD Netflix when I was like 20 or 21 years old. I started just scouring a bunch of 80s slashers at that time after that podcast episode I had listened to. I mean, obviously I had seen your typical ones by that point, your Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, all the Halloween movies, and I was looking for something more. This one and Maniac were the two that definitely made more of an impression when I watched both of those. And as far as like first impressions go, I mean, I do think, if I had to make a thesis statement about this film, I do think it's the best effects in any slasher movie. I think the kills, I don't think there really is any slasher movie that tops the kills, any 80s slasher in particular. I mean, Intruder may come close, Friday the 13th Part 4 and Part 1, because those were also Savini, may have came close, but there aren't really many in the league in terms of kills. I do have some other issues with it that we can discuss, but if you're looking for a slasher movie with just some really damn good kills, this is it.
Yeah, Joe Zito was known pretty well as being pretty brutal. And he always brought in Savini for his effects, even when he went on to do his action movies like Invasion USA and Red Scorpion. But one thing I will say about The Prowler, rewatching it this time around, and I love The Burning from 81, and I always would hold that as one of my favorite slashers. And even off memory of The Burning, I remember that some of the special effects don't hold up as well as I remember. You know what I mean? Like the finger, it looks a little rubbery. In this one, there seems to be a sense of realism, and you mentioned Intruder, which is also an excellent slasher with great kills, but they're a bit over the top. In The Prowler, they seem to be a little bit more grounded and add kind of to the brutality, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and in typical, slasher movie formula, like it really adheres to that as well. You've got the killer in sort of this unique getup. He's wearing the military style outfit. He's got the unique weapon with the bayonet. And the pitchfork as well, but the bayonet I'd say is probably more so the main one. And then even other stuff within slasher movies, you get the prior evil, of course, which is like the Dear John letter. You get characters outside the realm of the authority, right? Because the sheriff leaves for vacation. You get the sort of side story where you believe there's like a killer coming to town, like that happens in Black Christmas and in Prom Night, in both of those. And you also get like almost every slasher movie had like either a notable actor or some other credible actor to bring the movie some kind of credibility. In this case, you kind of have two. You have Farley Granger and Lawrence Tierney, although Lawrence Tierney in his own way brings a controversy as just as much as credibility. Something interesting about Farley Granger, I was thinking about this. I'm like, is there any other actor to have been in a Hitchcock movie, a giallo, and a slasher? I really don't know if I can think of any actor who is in all three. I mean, there's definitely some that weren't too. I mean, Donald Pleasance obviously was in giallo movies and slashers, but I can't think of anybody who was like also in a Hitchcock movie as well, because Granger was in two Hitchcock movies that I know of. He was at least in one giallo. So Sweet, So Dead is the one that comes to mind first. So, and then he's in this obviously for a slasher. So.
Was Glenn Ford ever in a Hitchcock movie? because Glenn Ford's in Happy Birthday to Me, and someone argued that it's a slasher and a Canadian gialli.
I don't know if he was. Yeah, that's a good question. It's Glenn Ford's a weird one. Like I remember he popped up in like a Sergio Martino movie in the late 80s, and I thought, what the hell is Glenn Ford doing in this movie?
That's like, there's so many weird actors like that. You're like, oh, he went to Italy at one point. Like, what was the like when I went through 1980? I think Glenn Ford was in that really bizarre Virus movie too, which was the kind of big post-apocalyptic Japanese American co-production by the director of Battle Royale, which is a cool movie, a very cool movie. It's got a very good, international cast in it. Like I said, we're going over Lawrence Tierney. We might as well talk about him. And obviously he was a notorious, troublemaker in Hollywood, but I'm more familiar with his work output from the 80s and his horror movies. And then later, of course, Reservoir Dogs and stuff like that. But what's funny is he had a handful of these kind of like, I guess people would say like slum-in-it horror movies, which is my bread and butter. I don't think anything slumming about it, but Midnight, which was the John Russo film, which came out a couple years later, where he plays a really bizarre character where he is like a rapist, but then again, he's also the the hero of the story, and he's also in Silver Bullet from '85 as well.
Yeah. I mean, there were stories about him on this film. There's stories about him in every film. Did you ever hear the story about him getting into a fight with Eddie Bunker on Reservoir Dogs?
Sounds about right.
The two guys who both went to jail at one point getting into a fight. Apparently, Eddie Bunker took a swing at him and missed, and that did not work out too well for Eddie Bunker, because you'd like think if you take a swing at Lawrence Tierney, you might want to connect on that swing. Otherwise, probably won't work out too well. Yeah,
on his head, because what I say, motherfucker looks just like the Thing.
Yeah, well, he's like those two guys. Him and Eddie Bunker are two guys, and Charles S. Dutton's the other one, where they're all actors who went to had stints in prison. They always seem to bring something to their roles because of that, I think.
Yeah, Eddie Bunker is definitely a unique character. Have you ever seen Straight Time? Excellent movie written by Eddie Bunker with Dustin Hoffman. And then, of course, Charles S. Dutton, actually killed a guy in a knife fight. I think it was like partially self-defense or whatnot.
I didn't know about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in Alien 3, it almost feels like he's playing himself in Alien 3. Like he's playing this sort of like, the type of guy he would have been in prison or something. He's great in that. But yeah, I don't want to go off on too many tangents.
Yeah. So I guess Tierney worked with Zito 3 times. And I watched Blood Rage when I'm doing the 80s. I remember watching it for 1980, but I completely forgot Lawrence Tierney being in that movie. And he's also in his first film, Abduction, which is, I guess, an exploitation film, which I will get to eventually, made in the late 70s. But he said on the commentary, they mentioned that Joe Zito said every time he directed him, he put a prop gun in his waist.
Yes.
So that's a genius idea. It's a fake gun. It's just like, just so you know, it's like, don't fuck with me, Lawrence Tierney, and that's just that's like a smart Jersey thing. Like that I would have never thought to do that.
I think Zito just seems to be a good director overall. I mean, obviously he went on to do some action films also in the late 80s. Like he did one of the Missing in Action movies, I think, Red Scorpion with Dolph Lundgren as well. But they talked about how he shot that scene of like the girl getting hit into the pool like 17 times or something like that. Like he definitely seemed to be a bit of a perfectionist when it came to doing what he wanted to do. Because there's that somewhat famous story of him and Judy Aronson in Friday the 13th Part 4, where he kept her in the water forever, and Ted White threatened to walk off the set if he didn't get her out of there, basically. So he does seem to be a guy who really wants to do exactly what he wants to do, which makes it even more interesting that they didn't use any storyboards at all for the kills. I actually couldn't believe that. I mean, I don't know. I'm not too much into actual filmmaking, so I don't know if storyboards are something people usually always do with stuff like that, but I figured it must make some sense to do it for at least some of them, and they didn't seem to do it for any of them. They just said, Tom Savini, go to work, do what you do.
But I feel like Tom Savini had that happen to him a lot, and they said they just call Tom up and he'd come and do all the effects and stuff. And like I said, the effects are excellent in this movie, and they held up more than I remembered. I always remember this movie as being a solid slasher with excellent kills and too much downtime. Now, I still think it probably does have too much downtime, but this time around rewatching, like I said, the tracking shot of our lead walking down the street in a windy night really worked well because the location was really nice. Again, they mentioned that they were lucky to get the locations they got. Otherwise, they would have been even hurting more. It would have just been very a boring film to make and to look at. And like I said, the supporting cast, the characters, the kids, they're not that memorable. They're not like a Friday 13th Part 4. Where you got all those different kind of characters. A lot of them are forgettable, although they're all solid actors, solid characters, and they have good deaths, but they just aren't as memorable a lot of times.
Yeah, I don't think the acting is bad or anything. I just don't find the characters all that interesting, particularly the deputy character. I thought that could have been more interesting. I actually think the main character is a little bit more interesting. She becomes a stronger character throughout. It was weird how, like, in the early 1980s, they said we'll get like they kind of did the same thing with Amy Steele. We'll get like the blonde, almost like girl next door type to be the main character, and like we'll see them get stronger throughout the movie, and we'll have the killer chase them around, and they'll find a way to overcome it, basically. Because there is that part, where the deputy is going to go investigate alone, and she like basically stands up for herself. She's like, no, you're not going alone, I'm going with you, basically. So you do have those moments. And earlier in the film, she was all in a mood because he ended up dancing with someone else at the dance scene, which is pretty funny. And then you have the I'd say not so great 80s hard rock band in there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
One thing I did notice about this is all the not the main characters, just kind of the side characters, all the adults, older people, are all dickheads. Like everybody's a dickhead in this movie. I don't know what it is. Like the guy at the dance, and then he goes down after yelling at the kid, and he becomes a peeping Tom that leads to absolutely nothing. 2 peeping Toms in the movie. And then we have, of course, the hardware store owner who's I saw him in the cemetery. Like, okay, that goes nowhere, but we know it's a Halloween rip. Of course somebody dug up the grave, but you could predate that all the way back to Texas Chainsaw and way ahead of that too. But it's just funny. And then we of course have the slow helper, which is part of it, feels right out of a Friday 13th early movie, like a crazy Ralph or somebody like that. And then we have, of course, Major Chanham, who is Lawrence Tierney, who is also a peeping Tom. So it's just a lot of adults, not to mention the overweight guy who he calls, who is absolutely no help with the scene.
Oh my gosh. that scene, it goes on too long, but it is kind of funny at first. Like it goes on a little too long. I think they kind of, I think that sort of joke overstays its welcome a bit, but it is still pretty funny when he's like, yeah, I could take a message. He is pretty good at that one part, and he's like, he's playing solitaire or whatever and drinking his Rolling Rock. I'm like a lazy front desk guy.
Look, could you take a message?
Yeah, I could take a message. Wait till I get a pencil.
The editor was in love with that guy. He was like, I'm using every second of this actor. Every second we got of him is going in this movie. He was there for 2 minutes, and every minute is in the movie. Farley Granger really doesn't have much to do in here. He doesn't really do much at all, and he's obviously not the actual spoiler. Anybody watching this, Farley Granger's the killer, but he's not obviously the guy walking around in the suit. He just pops up in the beginning, leaves, comes back at the end. But I don't think this was ever a huge mystery who the killer was.
No, I don't even think they were intending it to be either. I think they were kind of just going for the stalk and slash sequences and anything else they could do. One thing I found is that upon rewatching is I found like the scenes, when basically as soon as Pam starts walking back, it goes to the dorm, and then she, the whole chase scene happens, and then she goes to investigate the house with Mark and everything, that the Major Chatham house. And then it goes back to the band and the dance, and that whole sequence almost feels like something out of a dream compared to the rest of the movie. That's almost what I thought, because you see Major Chatham again, then you never see him again, and there's a lot of good I would say suspense moments, like when and a lot of these they just cut in, like that scene where they put the rose back on the victim in the shower. That was actually something they cut in. That was supposed to be right after she had died, but they cut it in to make you think the killer's still there. So they do a good job of some of the editing and making you think that there's more suspense than there probably really is. And she seems to see the killer at every turn. They do a good job of giving you like they don't give you a good sense of geography. Like, it's like, where is this killer coming from? Where could he be coming from? So like I said, that whole sequence almost feels like something out of a dream. And then when it cuts back to the band and the prom, you're just like, whoa, like this almost feels like a completely different movie because of everything that just happened in the past 15 minutes or so. That's how I felt about it, that sort of middle sequence.
I do feel like there's a soft look to some of the film that gives it a dreamlike quality. like especially in that scene where she's walking and the tracking shot and stuff. Another thing you mentioned, the rose. I think the rose is a really nice touch, and it kind of makes me wonder, if this movie had 3 or 4 more sequels, like that would have probably been a little bit more iconic in people's memory. Like, you think Friday 13th Part 3 with the mask, and like if Friday 13th, like 1 or 2, there was only one of these movies, but somehow the Prowler is almost there to becoming like super iconic, along with the Burning. And I think My Bloody Valentine's a little bit more successful at becoming a little bit more iconic and memorable than those two. But the Prowler just quite doesn't make it for whatever reason.
Yeah, I would also put The Mutilator in that class of movies in terms of standalone slashers. That one doesn't have any whodunit whatsoever. You know who it is, but
it's Big Ed, baby.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's my dad. Yeah.
Spoiler for The Mutilator, but I'm sorry. Yeah, like I'm just, the thing is, like, I do feel like there's comparisons to like Madman and The Burning here. But instead of having any flashback to like an old story, this one just opens up with the old time period piece. Like, and you're surprised that they really didn't kind of just put this in a flashback at one point, right? It's kind of a unique way to open your movie. Usually they would do it like a campfire this year. There's so many campfire tales, but instead they just have it right open your movie.
Yeah, and then there is not a bad kill in this. Like, you get the double impalement pitchfork kill at the beginning. You get it is my favorite kill in any slasher movie, is the bayonet through the head into the bottom of the chin, like where you see the knife. Like, every time I see that, I'm like, I kind of want to say, stop the movie right now. This is a snuff film. You just killed that. You just killed that human being. Like, it really looks convincing. And he's got like the white scleral lenses on for his eyes and everything, and just because it almost wouldn't look as convincing if the knife didn't go through the bottom of the chin, but somehow you got the prop at the top of his head and then it going through the bottom of his chin, and then the blood just going out from his head and from the chin a little bit, and like not a ton of blood either way. Like, it doesn't over exaggerate the amount of blood at times either. I think they do it just right. And Savini, I think, has talked about before, his he was a combat photographer in Vietnam and everything, and I think he really wanted to make sure things looked as real as they possibly could. Some other movies, I think he goes a little over the top. I mean, obviously, a big example for me would be the zombies in Dawn of the Dead aren't exactly the best looking zombies in the world to me. I think he did a better job in Day of the Dead, truth be told. But in this, he's pretty much right on the mark with everything. And even that kill in the pool is great. The kill after the throat slit near the bushes, that one's probably my second favorite, just because the way the knife looks in the neck there, just I'm like, wow, I don't know how they got that looking as right as they did. But there isn't a bad kill in this, and the head explosion, obviously, which is,
of course,
if you're talking top head explosions, that's probably still in the top 5. My favorite, of course, would probably be New York Ripper, but there's like a top 5 where you kind of have like the Beyond, the New York Ripper, Scanners, maybe this, and of course the Maniac one. Yeah, the Maniac one, Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, Dawn of the Dead has the great one.
Wooly's gone ape shit
in the raid scene. Yeah, with Wooly. Hey. Yeah.
One thing that Joe Zito is really good at is, I think that Savini and him worked well together, is a good director knows how to film special effects. And I think a lot of people probably threw Savini's effects right in broad daylight, The Burning, which is one of my favorites, but still, that's a movie that takes place broad daylight. It's hard to hide the effects. Well, Joe Zito tends to film his movies a little dark. I know a lot of people complained about Friday 13th 4 when they did the 4K master or 2K master, that like, it still looks really grainy and dark. It's just like, well, I think Joe Zito films his movies dark. Although he did mention he wanted more lighting in the cemetery scene, but still, I do think that his movies tend to be darker. You can hide some more of the scenes, and they just aged really well with Savini's effects. Not that I don't. It's hard to say. I think Day of the Dead is probably his finest hour, Savini. But I think that Prowler, in terms of slasher films, is one of his best, if not.
I actually really like his effects in Eye of the Stranger. If you're talking about the movies he did this year, he didn't have to do as many for that film, but when they're there, they're actually really good. I think the effects in that movie are probably better than the ones in The Burning, truth be told. But
they're subtle
he's
too.
got he's got a really good moment with a fishbowl in that one. I mean, he was sort of the king of the effects in the early 80s, for sure. Just like it seemed like every year he would do like 2 or 3 movies with effects that are all really good.
Yeah, well, 80 we have what? Maniac and Friday, of course. And
Yeah.
then we have 81, we have Eyes of the Stranger, we have The Burning, we have The Prowler, and then 82 we have Creep Show. So I mean, he
Yeah.
constantly was busy all the time and did an excellent job. I never did see the one he did in Japan. Did he work on a Japanese effect? I can't remember what movie.
I think
was
I
it
heard
Sweet
it.
Home?
Yeah, I heard about
Did he do
that.
Sweet Home's effects? I don't know if that's 100%
Maybe.
accurate. I never had a chance to see Sweet Home, as it's never.
He ended up doing a movie with Argento too. That is not one of my favorite Argento films.
Trauma.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm 100%. It's been years since I watched Trauma, but I remember watching it and being like, People are like, they always say that Dario's heyday ended with opera, and I really like the Stendhal Syndrome, and Sleepless is good as well. I just think that Trauma in there is kind of not up to snuff. I'll have to rewatch it, but
I'd rather watch The Card Player again before I watch Trauma, truth be told.
ooh, I'm not a huge fan of The Card Player myself. The one that really kills me is I really don't like Giallo. I hate Giallo.
Oh, I hate it too. No, that's not only one of that's not only the worst Argento movie I've seen. That's one of the worst movies I've seen. Period. Somehow, Adrian Brody, who's a good actor, is awful in it. I don't know what it was, but like he's a good actor and he's just terrible in that film.
Doesn't he plays dual roles? Doesn't he?
Yeah, and
He's
as a
terrible.
killer, he's just he's so bad as the killer. But yeah,
He wandered off the set of Dick Tracy.
yeah, it kind of was. Yeah,
like, and it doesn't match the rest of the acting. It's just like Johnny Depp and Tusk or something. You're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, this is not the same
but
thing.
he did a good job with Dark Glasses, though. That was good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. So as far as The Burning, like I there's stuff to talk about, but I don't really know what to do. Like, I mean, I do like that the end, the female actually gets to kill the killer herself. The deputy, like you mentioned, he's just bland and could have done without him in the movie entirely. He's kind of like the worst version of the deputy from The Prey, or the ranger that's walking around with the cucumber sandwiches. Yeah, I just don't.
Yeah.
Not that he's bad, but he's not exactly great either. But I do think this one does manage to capture a small town feel in similarity to My Bloody Valentine.
Well, and the Cape May location is good. They were filming it off season. And what this movie reminds me of, even though it's supposed to take place in June, obviously it was filmed at a different time, and you can almost feel it. The wind's there. You can hear the grasshoppers and stuff when she's walking around. Like it has genuine location value, if that makes sense. But to me, like, yeah, I know it takes place in June, but when I see it, what it kind of reminds me of, it almost reminds me of that time right when fall is about to start, like mid to late September, where the weather starts changing. That's almost the feel I get from the movie, and that's almost like the time of year when I try to watch it. And even though it's not, like, it almost feels like a Halloween movie before Halloween, like a month before Halloween or something, is what I get from it every time I watch it.
Any change of the season, any of that turn of the season gives a sense of nostalgia for me. As far as other 1981 slashers, how would you compare it to something like My Bloody Valentine? Like it better or worse? We'll just do better or worse.
I got my list right here. So, yeah, I got
of your top movies or slashers.
Yeah, my top 10 horror of 1981, because I did that when I called into Land of the Creeps. Well, My Bloody Valentine I have third, so I would have that ahead of The Prowler. The only movies I have ahead of that are The Beyond and The Evil Dead for obvious reasons. So, yeah.
Oh, so we'll just go over your list, see how it compares to other 1981 horror films.
So I have it at number 7. So the movies that I have ahead of it are The Beyond, The Evil Dead, My Bloody Valentine. I have Eyes of a Stranger at 4. I probably have that higher than most people would, but I really like that movie. Friday the 13th Part 2 at 5. Scanners at 6. The Prowler at 7. Bloody Birthday at 8. I actually really like that movie. Some people find it a little silly, but I like it. Then The Burning at 9, and then House by the Cemetery at 10, which, truth be told, is not one of my absolute favorite Fulci movies. I like it, but I don't like it as much as The Beyond and City of the Living Dead.
I think I have Beyond and City of the Living Dead over House by the Cemetery as well. Although I do love House by the Cemetery. If we were doing Fulci, I think it would go probably Beyond, Zombie, Don't Torture a Duckling, House by the Cemetery. No, City of the Living Dead, House by the Cemetery, New York Ripper, maybe, or something. It'd be tough. I mean, I'm a big fan of Fulci myself.
Yeah, I don't. In terms of my Fulci rankings, I mean, I have I have the Beyond up high, but the other two in the Gates of Hell probably wouldn't even make my top five actually for him. City of the Living Dead might be at six, but I have like Don't Torture a Duckling, The Psychic, New York Ripper, Zombie all ahead of that, and Massacre Time as well.
Those are
That's
both
my
great.
favorite of the spaghetti westerns. Yeah.
Honestly, the Psychic is probably his most underrated movie, and that takes a couple viewings, I think, to really appreciate, or a lot of reflection, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like if you're looking at the year in comparison, this one doesn't, it's kind of strange because it doesn't really stand out. It fits in perfectly with what the year is in 1981, and it's probably a top tier slasher from the year though. Top I'm trying to think in comparison myself. Just trying to even look at it objectively. I would say that Friday 2 is higher as a better movie. I would say that My Bloody Valentine is a better movie, and I'm trying to think else wise. I mean, you have
I do think I do think the effects in Friday the 13th Part 2 aren't as good, but the characters and some of the suspense scenes are better. I mean,
oh yeah.
if this movie had like, an Amy Steele and some of the other characters that are in that movie, I would put this one over the top, but it doesn't have that. Amy Steele's like one of the best final girls ever. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
As far as Final Girl, though, this one is solid. I think she's the best character in the film, actually.
Yes, I do think
By
she's
far.
good. And I wish like, Vicky Dawson, like she's not like I don't think she was in much else. I don't think she ever goes to any conventions or anything. I don't think they ever mention her in the commentary. Like it doesn't seem like she's a person that's very well known or easy to find. And that could also add to why it's just a little less known. Like, you see Amy Steele at conventions all the time. You see some of the people from My Bloody Valentine at conventions all the time. So it's just one of those things where it's just not as well known because of that. Like I can't, besides Tom Savini and maybe Joe Zito, I don't know if Joe Zito goes to too many conventions, but it's like those are the most well-known people from this movie. Everyone else is kind of, well, besides the character actors, like I said before, but everyone else is kind of in the background. No one really, no, I don't think there's really any notable people in it that you can really track down, it seems like.
I mean, this movie does have a lot of the tropes of a slasher. Of course, you have the journalist. She's a journalist character who knows partially the history of the town. That's in there, similar to a lot of the ones like even Friday the 13th too. She was interested in Jason and had some of the history down, so she knew what to do. So she has that one level up. Like you said, we have the peeping toms, we have the revenge kill, and all sorts of things like that. It's very much we have a activity, like a big event that they do not want to happen. That has not happened for years, and it's almost by the numbers, but somehow still a little bit better, and also very early on, so it can't really be accused of that much, like ripping.
That's what I like to call the sort of locale, or John Kenneth Muir, I think in one of his books calls it like the organizing principle of a slasher movie, like what it centers around. Like, you got your summer camp movies, your seasonal, like it seems like almost every holiday they have a slasher movie for it. So
or an event like we have prom night, we have a birthday, all sorts of things like that. Sorry about that. I'm getting sore throat. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about the Prowler?
No, not that I can think of really. Nothing off the top of my head. Like I said, I think I got to pretty much everything.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because like I wanted to have you on, but the Prowler is not the most, I guess it's not even that most documented movie. There's not that much information to look about the Prowler, you know what I mean? Without directly talking to them. I'm sure Savini doesn't remember as much.
Well, I thought it was funny in the commentary. He seemed to remember nothing about the plot. It was so funny. Like Zito had to keep reminding him which characters were what, and everything like that. It was really funny. Zito, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna try to watch some more of his movies. Like I haven't seen Missing in Action in years, or whichever Missing in Action he did. I can't remember if it was the first one or the second one. Red Scorpion, I'm interested in watching just because it's Dolph Lundgren, and Savini apparently did the effects for it as well. But yeah, it made me want to watch some of his movies.
Invasion USA, which is a pretty popular.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah,
which I haven't seen that one on television as a kid. I don't know if you've ever seen. I know Richard Lynch is the baddie and he's iconic in it. But Blood Rage, you should check that one out if you haven't seen it. It's a pretty gritty kind of little like kind of proto slasher, really sleazy guy in like a apartment staring at women and killing them. It has a couple moments that I was like, oh, this was pretty dark stuff. It's not an all-out slasher or anything like that, but still interesting enough. See, like I'm looking to say more about the film, and I feel like we got ripped off here because there's not that much for me to talk about the Prowler. I do like it. I do think it probably sits in my top 20 of 1981. I have kind of a different. I love slashers, and I watch all of them, but they're never super high in my top 10 list for some reason.
Well, some of them, I think it's just you have your more iconic movies, right? In some of these years, and that's the issue. Is like I like a lot of the slashers that came out in 81, but I like the Beyond in the Evil Dead more. What makes My Bloody Valentine so special is it's almost elevated above those with how good that one is. Like that one's just that one probably is my favorite standalone slasher of the 1980s. That and maybe Intruder. Those two for sure. I did have in my top 10 I had some honorable mentions, and I just wanted to list would you put the Prowler above Just Before Dawn?
I'd put them around the same place, honestly. I like
it's close for me too.
I think Just Before Dawn is underrated. Rewatching it, I always thought it was it got like a lot of love again, and I was like, is this movie over? And I'm rewatching it, I was like, I just liked Mike Arnold was so good in it, and I'm a big George Kennedy fan. I think it's creepy. I love the locations. And I like the Gemini, the twin thing. I think that was a really cool thing to do.
I always say that the ending of that movie gives a whole new meaning to the term deep throat.
No shit, right?
Yeah. I would not have it quite above Just Before Dawn, but it is close. What about Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, or Night Warning, I think is the other title. Now,
see, I have a hard time putting that as a slasher, but if we're counting it as a slasher, I'm going to put that very high on the list. I'm a huge Susan Tyrrell fan. I love Susan Tyrrell, and
she's
I like
great in that. But Bo Svensson's great. Yeah, he's so good. I love him in that movie. He's such a hateable character, but I do like his performance. I like him as an actor in general. Like he was one of those last. He was like one of the last great things about like Italian genre movies, like in the late '80s, where he was just in every Italian genre movie. And
Beyond the Darkness.
Yeah, and Primal Rage as the scientist. Yeah, Halloween 2. Halloween 2. Would you have it above that? Oh yeah.
I'm gonna take some heat for this. I'm not the hugest fan of Halloween 2.
Well, it's funny. I used to like that movie more than I do now. I think I used to like it more, but I have some issues with it now. And one of my biggest issues, I mean, I don't want to get on a huge tangent about this, but like the way people say, it continues in the same night, right? But it really makes sense. It really makes no sense. Like that has to be like the longest night in the history of the world. If that if it continues in the same night.
6 to midnight, the timeline doesn't match up. It's like the kids are winding down. There's not one kid on the street in the end of Halloween 1. And this is nitpicky. And then part 2 opens up. There's like a guy running down the street with a radio. Like that whole scene with the radio is such poorly written script material when he's walking down there, and it's like, oh, we're holding Jamie Lee Curtis as a survivor. They don't do that. They don't tell you that kind of shit on the radio.
I think Carpenter had been bending his elbow when he was writing that script for sure.
Gun to the head. They had a gun to his head.
How about Bloody Moon? Would you have it above that one?
I like Jess Franco, and I do like Bloody Moon, but I'm going to put the Prowler above Bloody Moon. I'm going to put the Prowler's better.
So would I. Yeah. I was just looking at my honorable mentions and seeing what I could put above it. As far as like 81 goes, like 81's a really good year for slasher films, and it's got my favorite horror film of all time. But I think in terms of the 80s, I might have it below 80, just because I think 80 was a better year for films, horror films in general, just by a little bit. Even though, like I said, The Beyond came out, but in 80 you got Cannibal Holocaust and like The House on the Edge of the Park, and the slasher movies I think were a little bit better in 80 as well. Even though the output in 81 is just more massive. You had a slasher movie coming out probably every week, which probably annoyed the hell out of Siskel and Ebert. But
they hate everything.
Yeah.
They're not. I would never take their opinion on horror movies.
You know what's funny though is I was just going to say one of the funniest Gene Siskel opinions I've ever heard. I always try to point this out to people because when I heard this, I was like, really? He said that John Carpenter's Vampires, he gave it 4 out of 4. And he said that I think it was one of his top films of that year, maybe his top films of 97 or 98, whenever that came out. And he said James Woods should be nominated for an Oscar for it, for Best Actor. I always thought that was one of the weirdest takes I've ever heard from him.
I mean, he's good in it, but I mean, like, he's better in Videodrome. Like, he's better in Casino. I mean, he plays a dickhead.
Once Upon a Time in America. Yeah.
Sometimes he might not be acting.
Yeah.
We learned that.
Oh yeah.
No, but Yeah, The Beyond's one of my favorite horror films ever made, and I would say that 1980 is a more eclectic, different year because I don't know if you've seen my top video or whatever I did, but it's pretty long. That's why I don't know if anybody's seen it. But I go through my top 25 favorite horror films of 1980, and there's a lot of Italian films on there. We have a range. This year has a lot. 1981 has a lot of werewolf kind of oriented horror films and slashers. I mean, we have like 5 or 6 movies that involve werewolves of some sort or wolves of sorts. So that's really bizarre. Like that never happens. Like, and I know people know the 2 big ones.
Yeah, now that I think about it, you got like the Paul Naschy movie,
Night of the
Did
Werewolf.
Wolfen come out this year? The Finney movie.
Well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Wow. Okay.
Then we have a couple odd ones like Wolf Hour, which is really excellent, where it's a psychological horror film. And I think National Mummy, which I haven't got a chance to watch yet.
Did She-Wolf come out this year too, or is that a little? No, I think that's a little later.
Is that a TV
the
series?
The Polish movie. No, I'm thinking the Polish movie, She-Wolf, Wilczeka, I think was called.
Oh,
I think that might have been a little later than
that's
this.
a little
83
later.
or 84.
82, 83, maybe. Yeah. I haven't watched that one yet. Was that in the Severn box set or no?
Yes, and I really liked it because I did. On my blog, I just did 4 random folk horror movies, and that was one of them I did, and that might have been my favorite one out of the 4 that I watched at that time.
Have you watched? I watched for 1970 when I did 1970. There was a movie that I watched called Low Keys, and it's in that. And then eventually Severn put it out in that box set, and I was like a huge fan of this movie, and no one else that I had watched it liked it, and I was like, "Are you insane?" Like I thought it was brilliant. And there was another one. I don't know
if I've seen that one because I don't actually have the box set. I've seen some of the movies that are in it because a good amount of them are on like Shudder and other streaming services, but some of them aren't. I don't know what the deal is with that. Severn will sometimes put things out, maybe sometimes they don't. I don't know. Like some of the ones, folk horror is also hit or miss with me. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. Like I always say with folk horror, I almost need like the witch or whatever it is to I need to actually see it to kind of like what I'm seeing, if that makes sense. Like one of the,
you might not like Low-Keys then.
Okay. Well, I did like one of them I did like on there that was a little bit more subtle. Like they don't necessarily show you a ton of the creature or whatever was Leptirica. I did like that one quite a bit.
I need to watch that one. That's a vampire oriented one, right?
And one I didn't like, even though a lot of people seem to like it. I thought it was okay, but I didn't love it. Was Clear Cut, the Graham Greene one.
Yeah, I need to watch that one still too, which is weird because I did 91 and before Severn put that out, like I ended up picking up a bootleg before they put it out, but Clear Cut wasn't really it wasn't known. Does that make sense? It wasn't talked about very much, and then that box set came out and it was everywhere. Another folk one that I watched for 1970, since we're going on a complete off the rails, doesn't matter.
Was Witchhammer that year too?
Witchhammer is 1970. That's a good film. That's a good film. That's very similar to
angry as hell, but yeah,
there's a lot of those
the problem.
In 1970.
Yeah, oh yeah, there's a lot
Witch,
of those folk horror movies where I just get so angry while watching them because of the whole
Mark of the Devil is 1970.
Reggie Nalder's great in that though. Is one of the villains. Reggie Nalder. Anytime he shows up as a villain, he's great.
Yeah, he's great in that. But Herbert Lom steals the show for me, as he always does. 1970 MVP right there. But there's one called the Wolf in the Woods, which is a really good kind of werewolf-oriented folk horror film that Vinegar Syndrome put out, and it was in a box set. I don't know, that might be going out of print, so it's a really good film, and that one was kind of knocking my socks off. Like I said, I feel like 1981 there is a couple different things to choose from. We do have, of course, the kind of supernatural horror with Fulci's output, and a couple zombie films, which are bizarre zombie films like Dead and Buried, which is one of my favorites from the year. But it's a really
Burial
slasher
Ground.
heavy. Yeah, Burial Ground.
Andrea Bianchi, what a director that guy is, because he just it's like, this is a guy who directed Strip Nude for Your Killer, Burial Ground, and he did Cry of a Prostitute, which is a movie in which Henry Silva sodomizes Barbara Boucher while shoving her face into a pig carcass.
Ugh. I mean, some of these actors, like Henry Silva's got to be like this. He's like, what am I doing with my life? Like, you know what I mean? Like, when you're just like, all right, here we go. Like, I hope nobody sees this one. I didn't know he directed that one. I haven't watched Cry of a Prostitute, but I did see one of his other films.
He's got some. interesting filmography. It's like, oh,
Oh, no
yeah,
doubt.
the director of Burial Ground directed Strip Nude for Your Killer. Like, you definitely expect that.
Oh yeah, he's a very sleazy director. What's the one that was? Well, I think Bo Sevson's in it. I think Bo Sevson's in Maniac Killer, but AKA Manic Killer. Like, I don't know. The DVD or Blu-ray is confused what the title's called. Like, it's not a good movie. It is a terrible film, and I don't mean like terrible as in like poorly constructed, as in like you go into a coma as you watch. You just, it's like I dare you to stay up for this one.
You have anything else to add?
I don't have anything else to add about the Prowler. Did you want to do any shout outs or anything else? Any last words on 1981?
So yeah, I mean, I've talked about it, but you know, like I said, the I'm just trying to think if there's anything else from 81. Not that I can think of too much besides just, like I said, explaining how it was a pretty good year for slasher movies. The output was really high. You got some iconic horror movies, and like you said, you got a lot of werewolf movies. Apparently, I didn't really even think of that. But I mean, you're the one studying the year a little bit more than I am, obviously. So there, you know, it's a really good year of output for horror, and I think the quantity a little bit outweighs the quality, but it's still a pretty damn good year as far as quality goes. As far as shout outs go, I mean, I'm on Land of the Creeps, the daily double episodes every other week. They come out every other Friday. Yeah, every 2 weeks, or yeah, every 2 weeks on Friday. And I'm on the Black Glove Mystery segment covering giallo movies and Italian genre movies with Greg Morgan. Sometimes we'll just do like a random bonus episode of a movie we want to cover. That's not necessarily giallo. And then I'm going to be on the No Bodies horror podcast. That'll be coming out in November. Pretty soon I'll be recording for WTM Watch This Movie podcast. I'm on their fall horror spotlight, and I'm going to be on an episode on the New York Ripper. So that'll be out sometime probably within the next couple of months.
Very cool. I also recommend you guys listen to Land of the Creeps, especially the double doubles. They're very enthusiastic. Ian and Greg do a great job, and they're very enthusiastic. They actually like the movies they're talking about, which is rare nowadays for people to like anything. But yeah, it's a very good show. Check it out.